Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to Torch Tales, Stories Behind the Hood. I'm your host, Frank Vargas, and we're going to get right into it. American Welding Society, part of the ArcStars program. American Welding Society's vice chair for the Atlanta section. Ex-instructor program director for the college that she used to work for. Mobile welder, jewelry maker, right? I know a few things. And Rachel Graham with AKA the Tiny Welder. It's a lot. I got to remember all these things, so bear with me. Rachel, thank you so much for
Thank you.
saying yes to spending this half hour in the back of Olive Garden because we're going to have some lunch after this. That's how we roll. Rachel, again, thank you. And I want to know, I kind of know what you do, but I want to know beyond that. Let's start with Rachel, the little girl.
Okay.
She's already called a Tiny Welder, so even before that. Where are you from?
I'm from Brazelton, Georgia,
Okay,
which is north of Atlanta.
gotcha.
I grew up there. My mom was actually mayor of Brazelton.
Oh, wow, excuse me, I'm in the presence of, yeah. All right, cool.
So she was mayor for 10 years. I went to Beaufort High School,
Okay,
and then I went to Gainesville State College, where I was early childhood education and then dental assisting before I took time away from school, where I worked for my dad, who's an electrical contractor.
gotcha.
He does big box retail.
Okay.
And I found my love for the trades.
All right, so are you our only child?
No, I have 3 brothers.
Okay, are you the youngest?
I share the babyhood with my twin brother, Daniel.
Oh, twin,
I
wow.
have a twin.
Okay,
And then I have 2 older brothers, Evan and Travis.
gotcha. Did your brothers also work with your dad or help your dad at some point?
At some point, we all ended up working for my dad. My oldest brother, Travis, still works for the company, and my brother, Evan, actually works for Juno Construction here in Atlanta. He's a CPA.
Wow, so somehow you were always involved and even organically exposed to the trade or a trade.
Yes.
So that's awesome. Now, as a kid, beyond that, what else were you into?
I was into quite a few things. I was the queen of starting a hobby, going all in, and then transitioning on to a new hobby. So
Did you ever finish one hobby before you went into the next?
I would get to where I felt like I mastered it and then be like, okay, I need something new.
Got it. There's no challenge here anymore.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Now, what kind of hobbies were they?
I did painting for a little bit. I did custom t-shirt designs, and then I learned jewelry. I'm self-taught bench jeweler. I make rings, earrings, pendants, bracelets.
Were you selling these or something?
I was.
Really?
I was going to boutiques and selling them on consignment or selling them wholesale to the stores, and then I was also doing craft shows, so I would sell my goods that way.
Oh, look at that. Businesswoman from the get-go. Was that... Now, how old were you, or around what age were you when you were doing that?
The jewelry, I started getting into that when I was about 21, 22 years old.
Gotcha.
And I still make jewelry today.
Really? But you're not selling it?
Not as much anymore. I'm kind of building because it's almost therapy to me at this point.
Yeah, that's what because I read something that she had posted. Like you guys all know, I do a little bit of homework on the guests, just enough to get in trouble, but enough to just know a little bit about them. Now, welding, so you are exposed in the trade with your dad, constructions, and all that. And then was your dad also welding or had welders that worked with him or for him or...
Not necessarily for him, but on the job sites we would go out. Sometimes they were remodels, but a lot of times they were new builds. So we would see them go from, grading to the building being erected, and that's where I saw a glimpse into welders. But I actually decided I wanted to go back to school for something that I could actually make a career out of and something I would enjoy. And so if it meant I used my hands, that was even better. The state of Georgia was offering free tuition for 17 in-demand fields, and welding happened to be one of those.
Free?
Free. So I went to school at Lanier Tech.
Give me a state that's doing that nowadays, right? I mean, that's... But you said you wanted to go back to school, so that means that you finished school.
So
And what were you thinking you were going to do before you went back to school?
So I didn't technically finish. I stepped away from school because I just bounced around from different majors, early childhood education and then dental assisting. And then at one point I think I was an art major. And
So you weren't sure.
not sure.
You're just pulling things into the tool bag and see what stick.
Exactly. What
Yeah.
did I like?
I see. And what was it about welding? Well, I know that the free scholarship helps to make a decision, right?
Definitely.
But was that the major catalyst that said, "Oh, I can save money and find a career that seems appealing"?
That was basically it. Electrical was one of the options, and since I had that prior experience from seeing my dad's company, and I almost went electrical, but when I saw welding at the bottom of the list, I pictured myself sparks flying, hood down.
Hair on fire.
Exactly. Huge
I get
smile.
it. I get it. How long were you a welding student?
I was a student at Linear Tech for 2 years,
Okay.
where I learned all the basics or fundamentals of each process: stick, TIG, MIG, and flux core, and then as well as an advanced component
Gotcha.
to those processes.
And after the 2 years, did you still look at welding as, yeah, this is really what I want to do? Like there was no fake or anything like that. That was it.
Yeah, there was no doubt in my mind that welding was 100% for me. The first day of class, we actually used oxyacetylene. We did some cutting, and then we did some welding.
Okay.
And I knew from that moment that I was absolutely hooked. I couldn't wait to learn and
Really?
grow.
Did you get a job after the 2 years?
So I did. For the Atlanta section, I was going around and giving membership presentations.
All right, so hold on, because now we're jumping ship.
Okay.
For the Atlanta section of what? The American Welding
The
Society?
American Welding Society.
All right, but how did you get to be part of the Atlanta section?
While I was enrolled in school,
Okay.
the Atlanta section hosted a technical meeting at Caterpillar in Athens, Georgia.
Okay. At that moment, you had no clue what AWS was.
Other than my instructor and the program director at the time was the vice chairman.
Okay. All right,
So
got
he
it.
recommended that the students go to the technical meeting. He said we could have attendance for class, and I was one of those students that wanted to stay in the booth and didn't actually want to go, so I'm glad he pushed me to attend this
Okay.
technical meeting, and I actually won my student membership at that meeting.
That's awesome. All right, so now you are part of the section. As at what capacity? Just a student, or did you actually got a role in the section?
At that point, I was just a student member, but I had kind of asked my instructor and the program director, how do I become more involved?
Okay.
And at that point, he invited me to an executive meeting where they made me the student liaison for the section. It was my first title, and
Gotcha.
I basically just helped out at section meetings and did different things, took photos.
Anything that it took, right? Yeah.
Yeah, everything. I did
Yeah.
a little bit of everything. I wore all the hats, and I really liked the guys on my Atlanta section board, and they, after, I think it was about 6 months, they asked me to be the treasurer.
Got it. Now, coming in with fresh eyes, being younger than most of them there, I'm assuming,
Yes,
being a girl,
yes.
all right, it's very appealing for a section to have someone like you, not just because of what I mentioned, but also because of the young, fresh eyes, looking at things differently, and maybe just even handling their promotions or their exposure through social media
Exactly.
much better than most sections, right?
Yes.
And I think that's one of the things that you guys have done, because the Atlanta section kills it out there. You guys have a great attendance, a great members. But when you first joined as a treasurer, did you know exactly how you were going to be helping, how you could help that section? Like you already had a mindset like, okay, this is what I can bring to the table.
So yes and no. In a sense, I knew that I was going to do whatever I had to do to help the section and my fellow members. But I didn't know really what I was learning as I was growing.
Got it.
I've learned more about the section and how it's operated with the different positions, vice chairman, treasurer, and how they've structured things to where you get to be in each position so that you can better serve the section and better serve your the members of your section, because the Atlanta section is not just the city of Atlanta, it's the entire state of Georgia.
That's why it's so big. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which other sections are going to compete with that? I mean, the South Florida section, there's no way we can compete with the whole state. We just have these, they have that.
Yeah.
But it's great. It's at the end of the day, it's about the welding industry being exposed,
Definitely.
and vice versa to everybody else. Now, so now you are a actual member of your section with a role. You are you an instructor, a welding instructor yet?
At that point, I was not.
Okay.
I was.
So what were you doing to make a living at that point?
I was still working for my dad. I worked for my dad while I was in school.
Okay.
So I graduated during COVID.
Okay.
And
So all by yourself, so in a room somewhere?
Well, it was a drive-through graduation. So we drove the car up to the stage. I got
Honk
out
the
of the
horn
car.
and the balloon.
Well, I got out of the car and I got to walk up towards the president, but I couldn't get too close. We didn't shake hands. And
It's a new world. It's a new world. I'm so glad I was not part of that era.
It was interesting.
It was very interesting. So for your dad, what were you doing exactly for your dad's company?
I did a little bit of everything.
Yeah.
They called me the gopher. I would go here for this, here for that. But I worked in the field doing devices and receptacles install and just basic jobs around the job site. And then I would work in the office in the warehouse. I was warehouse supervisor, and I would make sure that when trailers came in, they got inventoried for material.
Gotcha.
Everything got pulled, and then we replenished what was in there to send it out for the next job.
Talk about a great training for what was coming next in your life, right?
Yes.
Overall, like, I mean, who gets that start to begin with? So that was awesome.
Yes.
Now you're still working with your dad. You are part of you are a student. You are part of AWS. And at that moment, there was no vision or light at the end of the tunnel that you were going to become an instructor, a welding
No,
instructor.
not at
How
all.
did that come about?
That came about while I was working for my dad. I got asked to help with a membership presentation at Fortis College in Smyrna, Georgia.
Okay.
At the time, I was doing a few different things. I was social media coordinator for the section and still the treasurer. But I went for the meeting. At that time, the chairman, Renee Andron, allowed me to actually conduct that membership presentation on my own. And the program director was very impressed with how I conducted myself. He offered me a job right after.
Really?
And I actually turned it down the first time. Because I had just come out of school where
You didn't think you were ready.
Exactly. Where I knew the information. I didn't think I...
How can I teach it?
Exactly.
There's a big gap.
Definitely.
Now, so when you said no the first time, he left you alone for a while? Or you saw him again at some other event? It's like, by the way...
Well, a few weeks later, he actually reached out to me again and asked me to apply and said that it could be a trial basis. If it didn't work out, that I could basically cut and run. And I took him up on the offer. I applied for the job and I got it, and I loved it. And I worked it for about 3 years.
3 years. Now, you were a student before, and now you are becoming a welding instructor.
Yes.
Did you think there was a big difference on how you learned and how you were taught and how you wanted to teach? Was there a big difference?
I would say there was not a difference. I had the pleasure of having two really great instructors at Lanier Technical College, and Tom Rieger and David Ennis. They were very helpful, very knowledgeable. And so I modeled my instructing a lot off of what I received there, as well as different things as I was a student coming out, or going through school, high school. I took different things that those teachers did that really related to me, and I employed that in my own teaching structure.
That's pretty cool. What did you think it was the hardest thing of being a welding instructor at such a young age?
The hardest thing was, so the cell phone made it kind of hard. In the sense
explain.
of, I'm taking pictures and videos of the students while they're welding, and then when I go to check on a student in the booth and they are on their own phone because they've been taking pictures and recording themselves, and it just kind of...
It became a monster on its own.
A little bit.
Wow, I never thought about that, but yeah, it's part of the new era, the new world that we live in. It's kind of like a double-edged sword, right?
Yes, but it was also, I would have students who they would come into the program, and it wasn't like they were challenging me, but they wanted, and understandably so, they wanted to see what I could do and,
Of course.
and how I got here. So anytime that came about, I would always say, okay, let's go into
Let's
the
go.
lab,
Yeah.
and I will show you why I hold this position. And why I'm here.
And it sucks because let's face it, the reality is that a lot of these students, again, the male ego, we go into a classroom, we see this Tiny Welder instructor. What does she know? There's no way. I mean, come on. So I can only imagine, and I wasn't there, that was part of the challenge.
Definitely, and it wasn't all students.
Yeah.
And as they went through the program, and they had me as an instructor, they really understood.
She knows her shit.
Exactly. Not only that, I was passionate about it, and I pushed them to be passionate about it.
No, that's really cool. Now you also became program director,
Yes.
right? What is the difference? Were you still teaching as a welding instructor?
I was.
All right. So a program director, tell me what that does.
So the program director, their main job is to make sure that the program has all of its needs met. That includes not just the program itself, but the instructors and the students. So I would make sure that we had all the material that we needed, the consumables we needed.
Gotcha.
As new students were coming into the program, I was making sure that we had toolkits ordered for them. I was also holding staff meetings to make sure my instructors had everything that they needed.
I see.
And I also, being that I had the benefit of being a part of the American Welding Society's Atlanta section, I would do things like competitions and challenges for the students.
Full exposure of everything in it. Now, when you are an instructor, I know, were you doing, because now I know you run your own mobile shop.
Yes.
Were you doing that while you were teaching? Or that kind of came like right around the same time when you took on the teaching job?
Once I moved into the program directorship,
Yeah.
I knew that it had always been a goal for me to open my own business,
Gotcha.
Mobile fabrication at some point. But as I took over the program directorship, it's really like running a business.
Correct.
So it really kind of
Sparked that even more.
or through lighter fluid onto that already lit flame.
Makes sense. And so you register, you got your whole thing, you know, everything's by the book.
LLC.
Cool, that's awesome. How do you promote yourself to get jobs? Like, how are you getting out there?
So currently I haven't had to really promote myself yet because word of mouth has worked very well for me. As I started doing a few jobs, people were hearing about the work that I was doing, and I've been able to get other jobs based off of that. But I've been doing some work for a metal supermarket and emergency machine services, and they've kept me really busy. So
now I got to ask you this, just to see if it's the same thing. So same thing I mentioned earlier, when you were teaching at the school and some of the guys, would look at you and say like, all right, do you really know what you're doing? Have you experienced that now being on your own? Some works, when you get there, they'll look at you, I'm like, is she the one that I called?
Yes, it actually is funny. I went to a job and I showed up to talk to my point of contact to figure out exactly what I needed to do, and he said, okay, we really should wait for the welder to get here. And I said, okay, well, we can wait. I went out to my car, I grabbed my tools, my welding hood, put it on my head, and I came back in and I said, do you want to talk about it?
She's here.
Yeah, she's present.
Oh, what did he say?
Oh, he just laughed. He had a good sense of humor about it.
Good. That's awesome. See, it's. I'm telling you guys, we gotta change. There's so many things wrong with us, in a good way. Now, because you're no longer teaching or are the program director, right?
Yep. No, I left Fortis in November.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. And what would you say it's the hardest thing to being on your own doing work out there? Is it the conditions? Is it dealing with people? Is it the place where these welds are happening? Like, what would you say that's the hardest thing?
So I would say it's. I honestly love it. I don't see anything being that hard. If anything, it could be some of the environments in which I go welding.
Got it.
The position of the piece that I'm repairing could be the hardest issue, but when you love what you do, you wake up ready to go every day. So.
What an attitude, huh? What a concept. Now, I know that you're also part of the program called ArcStars for the American Welding Society. What is that and how did that happen?
So ArcStars is a group of people, myself included. It's got Dabs Wellington, Jason Becker, Danae, Stephanie Hoffman, and Chloe, and we basically put out as much information about welding as we can. We were people that the American Welding Society identified as influential individuals in the industry, so we put out as much helpful, knowledgeable information as we can to help the next generation of welders.
That is pretty cool and so needed for many different reasons. Do you see yourself doing anything else in your life other than being involved in the welding industry?
I think when I retire from welding, I will dive heavier into the jewelry making, because I think by that time I'll have quite a collection built up, and I can just open a store and just sell my own goods. But
that's awesome.
But that would be as far as
right. Now, how come? Because you know you have your own metal fab company. How come you don't do more welding art, or you don't dab more into since you make jewelry?
I do.
And then it's like it's almost right there.
Exactly, the intricate, the creativeness.
Yeah.
I've been kind of on the edge of the iceberg, ready to do some creative sculptures.
Okay.
I've been asked by a few people to create a few things, so I feel like the timing is right.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna see if that avenue of creativity works for me. We'll see.
I think it will. I think it will.
Because I see artists like Ray Ripple and Sarah Stork and all the incredible things that they create, and
if they can do it, so can you. I mean, I know you're going to kill it. How much for the AWS when you travel, when you go to a Fab Tech and these kind of shows? What's the outcome that you really want out of these events and venues when you go?
The outcome that I go for is networking. I want to try to meet and experience as many people as I can at those different events, because that'll do me more good than anything. If my name is in rooms that I've never stepped into, that works for me.
That is,
as long as the right things are being said. But I feel like I put a positive spin on everything. I try to make everyone feel good. So.
No, I think you do. I think you do. And now, are you as involved with your section even more now so than before?
Yes, because I'm currently still the treasurer.
Okay.
But I'm also the vice chairman of the section.
Okay.
So at some point I will take over as chairman. But I still run the social medias. I still take the photos. And with Renee, Renee's help.
Yeah, Renee, by the way, at some point I want you to be here on Touchtail, so I'll ask Rachel to put a good word for me. Social media, now that you mentioned it. Mm-hmm. Were you always into social media as you were coming along in the other things that you were into, jewelry and all that? Do you know that social media, it's another tool, and how do you really go on the approach of using social media?
So I actually had no intentions on starting a social media. The same program director who saw potential in me was the one who recommended that I start my social media. His name is Josh Penland. Thank you, JP.
There you go.
But I started the Tiny Welder, and I just wanted it to be a page that could showcase what welding was and to offer information for students who needed help with scholarships or grants, or
that's cool.
Just were thinking about getting into the trades. It was a platform to where they could come and ask me my experience, and I could help them along the way. And it's just, that's what I've continued to try to grow. But I've always loved taking photos and stylizing them and changing them. And then the reels are so fun too, to chop up videos and photos.
They are. So for those out there that might be watching this or watch this at some point and like, what platforms do you use to edit and to do your reels or change the formats of the pictures? Like, what do you use?
So for the photo editing, I do a lot of that on my phone. I have a Google Pixel, and it has incredible photo editing.
Okay.
But I use TikTok and Instagram mainly.
Gotcha.
If Instagram doesn't have a particular
filter or something specific,
or transitions, I'll take it to TikTok and vice versa.
So what's going to happen with TikTok gets pulled out of the market?
I'll stay with Instagram.
I'm just kidding, guys. That's just a political comment. I think what you do is amazing for many reasons, and I think I've been somewhat following you for a while, and kind of seeing your progress and your growth, and it's hard not to see it. So that's awesome, not just for you, but for the American Welding Society, for the welding industry, for everyone that gets exposed to you, and you can actually teach something, pass something forward, pass the torch forward. Now that you are a seasoned welder, wow, that sounds good.
It does.
Right? A seasoned or about to be a very seasoned businesswoman, okay? In the next 2-3 years, because we talked about in the future, long from now, the jewelry and all that, but in the next 2, 3, 4 years, short-term goal, where would you like to see yourself?
I would like to see myself continue to grow the Tiny Welder to be even bigger, to where I can have, more employees.
Okay.
Or employees. And but I'd also maybe like to see myself in a regional trainer position for a company.
Okay.
That's something that I could see myself being very, very good at. So
That's awesome. People like you are so needed in the industry. For, like I mentioned before, that generation that's coming along, and that other generation that is retiring or unfortunately dying. It's life, and so all that knowledge needs to be passed forward for everyone out there. If there was you are following your dreams and your passion.
yeah.
But if there's a little girl, little boy that's watching this and is not sure about white collar, blue collar, what would you say to them?
I would say, I feel like there were signs for me when I was in school. I always felt like I was a bad student, but it was because I was learning things that I wasn't passionate about. When I went back to school for welding, it all fell into place. I immediately became a 4.0 student,
Wow.
nominated for awards, and absolutely loving being a student, taking tests, everything. So if you're wondering if you're right for blue collar or right for white collar, ask yourself, do I like building things with my hands? Do I like being outside? Do I like being challenged? And kind of tailor it that way.
That is so true. We all kind of know that, but we never hear it that explained that way. It's how someone that was a okay student just finds a passion,
Exactly.
and then just like that, everything changes.
It all fell into place.
Right? Literally. Well, Rachel, again, I'm humble. Thank you. Thank you so much for saying yes. And I hope you guys learned something about the Tiny Welder. And because I know I did. And for those of you, she's a prime example of that. It doesn't take much to make it. I mean, she's dabbling into all of those things, and then she kind of keeps growing and growing. So please get inspired. Go do what you love. And there's nothing to it. It's very easy once you do. Thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys like the content. Keep supporting the channel, and this is for the welding industry. Take care.
Thank you.